Dun, 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 dee. Da, 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 da. This is going to be another big example of, micro hurting you more than it helps. So you're going to make a 2 racks push that is going to be big enough to theoretically kill what he has defending. And then instead of just A-moving them and winning the battle, you're going to try to stutter step them and move them around, and it's going to make you lose the battle instead of winning the battle. So and then you're going to do that like 2 more times throughout the game. This stutter stepping costing you more than it gains you is really a big concern. What is going on with that? Did you see that? I feel like you're alt-tabbing to like turn on music or something. There's just no excuse in the extremely early game when every SCV is of maximum importance because you only have one guy at each of your patches, so the next SCV is going to be fully efficient, to delay SCVs like this for no reason. Like, that was a really long delay for no reason. So, don't alt-tab when you're opening the game, man. Or if you're going to do it, queue up 2 workers and then alt-tab. Even with that delay, you still delay the second SCV because of the late depot. So you really got to get this depot down at a reasonable time. Again, we're looking for the 14 gas. If you take your gas too early like this, 13 gas. And to get the 13 gas, you accidentally cut a worker too for a little while. Not a whole worker, like a 20th of a worker. But this gas is too early, so we're going to see that you have a bunch of gas that you just can't really spend. And you won't have enough minerals to get your orbital on time and to get your second racks on time. So right now, you want to be getting your orbital, but you also want to have a marine queued up, which means 150 here and 50 here. I don't know if you have enough. I think you do. That's if you cut these 2 marines, you'd have enough. But it's just getting the gas earlier is going to delay this second racks is what it's going to delay. It's not going to delay getting your orbital. Again, you didn't get your orbital. I feel like you're doing this on purpose. You're going all the way to 19 and then orbitaling from there so that you can, I don't know, I guess you do it at different times in different games. Always get it on 16. It's so easy. Just queue up SCVs so that they'll run out at 16 and then make the orbital whenever they run out. You know, you can plan ahead. Anyway, you want exactly 50 gas right now so that you can get this reactor core. You have 100 gas and only 100 minerals. So yeah, again, build efficiency thing. You got this gas too early. You're 50 gas ahead. We're going to see you being 50 gas ahead throughout the entire game, or at least throughout the entire first 8 minutes. As soon as your orbital finishes, you want SCVs to come. Again, teeny tiny delays. And I know it seems like if you delay for 1 game second or 2 game seconds, who really cares? It doesn't really matter. But you're just going to see it adding up. You're usually a full 2 or 3 SCVs behind at 6 minutes. And in most of these games, you've had 21 SCVs instead of 24.5. So you're pulling to go now. You missed a supply depot, and so you're supply blocking. You're not making SCV partially because you're supply blocked, and partially because you're just not watching. You're attacking with your army down there. So this has been very not clean. Let's see exactly how far behind all of these combined mistakes have put you. You're exactly 2 SCVs behind, which is, you know, pretty decent compared to the other games, but terrible compared to what you should be shooting for. And you are, it looks like you have exactly the right number of troops. So you have $900 spent and concussive shells finished. So this is the army you normally want to have, but in order to get it, you had to cut 2 SCVs. So you want to have this army and not be cutting 2 SCVs to get it. You are also going to see that right now is when you'd like to be starting combat shields. And you have 200 gas instead of 100, and that's just 200 gas you can't spend. There's nothing you can do with that 200 gas. So too much gas, take a 14 or a 14.5 gas, not a 13 gas. And here is where we're going to say you have a $1,100 army. This is 7 Marines and 2 Marauders. So 2 Marauders with concussive shells can definitely kill this tank. These 7 Marines can definitely kill these 4 Marines. With 5 SCVs pulled, actually 6 SCVs pulled, you can probably do both of those things and kill a depot. But you don't have to. What you want to do is get your guys up on the ramp, or down here and on the ramp, and then just let them fight. Let them do whatever it is they want. So right now, if you just A-move, these guys are not all going to be shooting, right? But look, almost all of them are shooting if you just A-move. It's just this 1 Marine that gets caught not shooting. And so what you're going to do is say, well, my one Marine can't shoot, so I'm going to try to stutter step up the ramp. But you're not stutter stepping. A stutter step is, so you have your army selected, right? You right click, you A, you left click, you right click, you A, you left click, you right click, you A, you left click. And you do it on the same spot, like right here. You pick that spot and you go right click, A, left click, right click, A, left click, right click, like that. And that's how you stutter step. Instead, you're just going to move. You're going to move your whole army all the way into his base. And during this whole time that your army is moving, you lose 4 SCVs. Your army was clearly big enough to kill his army a second ago, but now after losing 5 SCVs and 4 Marines, it's not big enough to win anymore. So, you know, that's the cost of moving all the way into his base like that. That was a crazy thing to do. Don't do that. Don't do that. No, don't do that. Don't do that. So now you have 400 minerals and 300 gas back home. You don't have any late long-term upgrades working. You haven't been making workers. You basically, because that's an all-in, you all-in with it. You didn't make anything back home. But there's kind of no reason to do that. Either pull every single SCV you have or keep spending your money. Because what's the point in all these guys mining if they're not going to spend any of the money on anything? So the transition from here is to make sure to keep up production on the buildings you already have and then add additional things on top of that. You don't cut infantry production to get more stuff. That's crazy sauce. Crazy sauce. Because, I mean, you almost won that push. You could probably have won with a follow-up. If we look at 8 minutes, we know you had exactly 1,000 at 6 minutes. With constant production, you should have 2,000 at 2 minutes later at 8 minutes. So at 6 minutes you should have had 1,000 and you did. At 8 minutes you should have 2,000 and you don't. You're 600 minerals behind where you $600 behind where you should be. That's minerals and gas combined. And a big part of it is that you didn't spend your gas on upgrades. You would have only 100 gas in the bank instead of 300 if you had. And another part of it is that these buildings are completely idle for a really long time. So also at 8 minutes you wanted 30 workers. So there's kind of a ritual every time you watch a replay. First thing you do is check benchmark. Second thing you do is find out why you lost, and then, you know, that's it. That's all you have to do. How did I do on my benchmarks? Why did I lose? Those are the two questions. So the 8-minute benchmark, you lost 6 workers, so you should have 24 plus the dead 6 would be 30. So you're 4 workers behind, and each of these 4 workers that you've dropped behind would just do, you know, an idle command center. And there's a temptation when you have 2 racks that could be making Marines, and you have Marines and Marauders, and you have to make an SCV. There's a temptation to say, well, if I build 1 SCV, then I'll be able to afford 1 SCV, 1 Marauder, and 2 Marines, and I'll just barely be able to afford everything I need. So I shouldn't queue up that second Marine, because if I did, I'd be that second SCV, because if I did, I'd be cutting a Marine. But the problem is that over time, over several minutes, missing several workers is going to put you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars behind. So even though in that moment when you're making that decision it seems like the right decision, over the long term it's the wrong decision by a mile. So always queue up at least 2 and usually 3 SCVs at every command center you have throughout the entire game. And if you did that, you would never be off benchmark, because you wouldn't even have to think about it. It wouldn't be like, oh, I'm really bad at remembering to make SCVs. If you only have to make SCVs every 50 seconds, then it's much easier to remember. You know, the reason that you're missing SCVs in these games is because you're not queuing up. So you're trying to remember every 17 seconds. But if you take 20 seconds to remember, now you miss a whole SCV. Whereas if you had 3 of them queued up and you missed by 3 seconds, you wouldn't miss anything. You would just... It would say you have 3 queued up. Oh, now you have 2. Now you have 1. All right, now you have 3 again. Now you have 2. Now you have 3. Now you have 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 1, 1, 3. You know, like, so we're gonna see another great example of this right here. Your opponent does something ridiculously stupid, which is to leave most of his army back home and then poke you with a couple of really expensive units. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. So, this is a big mistake that your opponent is making. He's going to take a tiny army. Even though right now he has an army big enough to completely kill you and end the game, he's not going to use it. He's just going to take about half of it and suicide it into your army. Now, from your viewpoint, here you are, and right now, all you're doing is macroing. All you're doing is macroing, and you're doing a good job. You've queued up to 3 SCVs, and this is great. And you're spending your money well. You've spent all your gas, so your 2 starports are idle. This is why going double starport is a little bit weird. let me explain how starports work, even though I was totally sidetracking myself. But yeah, Tech Lab starport costs 1 gas geyser. A reactored starport costs 2 gas geysers. If you have 4 gas geysers, you can only afford 2 reactored starports and nothing else. If you also want to make tanks, you just can't afford these 3 things together. So don't ever go 1 factory, 2 reactored starports all off of 2 bases. You just don't have enough gas for that. Back to what I was saying about what you're doing. So let's look at your little camera. So you move a Marine out there. Suddenly he shoots that Marine. So now you're gonna say, oh, he's shooting at my Marine, I have to go look at that. I have to get my army in position. And this is the right move. When you suddenly see unsieged tanks coming towards you, top priority. Let's sorry. Sorry. So yeah, the first thing on your list, let's stop what we're doing and try to engage before those tanks siege up. But we're going to watch while you're doing that, while you're microing this battle. First of all, remember what I said about attack moving hurting you more than it's helping you? What do you do here? First, you have these guys in this beautiful arc, all surrounding the ramp. They're in perfect position to fight anyone who walks up that ramp. First thing you do when you see his army coming is you grab your army and take it from this beautiful position and move it out of the beautiful position and hide them all in a corner. Right? That's the first mistake. What are you doing? That whenever you engage, you try to have as much surface area against the outside of your opponent as you possibly can. So you want your army to look like this. And you jammed it all into a little pile. Don't do that. Secondly, now that it's jammed in a little pile, you say, oh, I better engage before those siege tanks siege up. So you're going to right-click your guys right here. See that cute little red thing? So you siege up your tanks, and then you right-click up here. And so your guys are just walking around. They take 2 full tank shots before they even fire. You should have won that fight without losing a single unit. If you had not touched your units, if you just sieged up your tanks and then just left everyone else alone, not done anything to them, then by default, the Blizzard AI would have attacked down the ramp with all of these units, and his whole army would have died, and you wouldn't have taken a single siege tank shot, and you would have only lost maybe 1 Marine. But instead, you're going to move your army over here and try to get so close to the tanks that they can't shoot at you, but it never works. Like, the minimum range on siege tanks is such that if he has more than 1 siege tank or more than 2 siege tanks right next to each other, it's never worth trying to get close to the siege tanks. Don't try to get close to them. Just hit them from the furthest away you can hit them from. Ideal engage infantry versus siege tanks is max infantry range. That's where you want to be shooting at him from. You want as much surface area as possible, and you just want to be attacking into him. Especially when you don't have stim. The time it takes to move is time when you're taking damage but not shooting, and it's just terrible. So this is the second example in the same game of you just using move commands to basically suicide huge portions of your army. And I don't want you to do that, man. Just A-move everything. Just always A-move. Always A-move. The second important thing about this fight is that, so before this fight, you're keeping up on your macro. And when you see that he's attacking you, the most important thing is to attack move him. So imagine a land in which instead of having only 1 SCV queued up right here, you had 5, right? So you're not going to look back at this command center until the fight is over, because it would be silly to look at your command center while you're fighting, right? So you're going to fight and then you're going to look at your command center. If you have 5 SCVs queued up already, then the amount of money you had in the bank would be slightly lower, but it wouldn't be so much lower that it isn't still huge. So it would basically cost you absolutely nothing to have 5 SCVs queued up at both of these command centers right now. And the big difference is, while you're fighting, this command center is going to finish what he's doing, and now he's not doing anything. Whereas if you had 5 SCVs queued up, he would have been making SCVs the whole time. So eventually you remember, and then when you remember, you make 1 SCV, and then you forget again. And then, like, look at this. Look at how many workers you have mining on these 8 mineral patches. You have 7 workers mining. So you've Yeah. This is your biggest problem by far, is that if we look at, like I said, benchmark wise, at 14 minutes you should have a $9,000 army if you fast expand, and you have a $5,000 army, and the reason that your army is so small is just that you don't have enough workers, you don't have enough money. Look, you've spent every penny you had. You're at 230. That's perfect. Your spending is great. And you still have a tiny army. And why? Because you just don't have any workers. And I recognize that pulling some workers early has impeded your worker count as well, but also this guy only has one worker on him. Another big thing that I've noticed in this game and the other game that you sent me was that your saturation balance is often a problem. You've got 24 workers mining minerals at your main and only 7 guys mining minerals at your natural. What you want to do for saturation balance, there's 2 ways to do it. The ideal way to do it is to get exactly 18 or 20 workers on minerals at your main, and then double rally both of your command centers down to your natural. And then as soon as you get 20 workers on your natural, you triple rally all 3 of your command centers to your third, and that's how you know I do it. That's how really good players do it. But the problem with doing it that way is that it requires that you constantly check how many workers you have. You constantly want to be doing this, where you select all the guys you have mining minerals and say, well, how many is this? All right, you can select all the guys mining minerals. How many is this? And if you're doing that, there's something else that you're not doing. You know, like StarCraft is a game of priorities. What's the most important thing? And saturation balance is pretty high, but it's not necessarily so high that it's worth dedicating that amount of time to. So the second way to do saturation balance is when you very first land your second command center, just take all of the guys on 4 of your patches and move them to your second base. So this is 8 patches, right? As soon as this base gets up, let's go back. Blah, 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 blah. So as soon as this is finished, right now, what you want to do, you have 16 guys here, so you want 8 of them to go down to your natural. And one way you can do that is to count your guys and say I have 16, and then count out 8 of them and say I'm going to put these 8 down here. And that's kind of a slow way to do it, but if you're in a rush because you've got other things to do, then a much faster way to do it is to just count your mineral patches. Now every map, every base has 8 mineral patches unless it's a gold. So what you want to do is grab all of the guys mining from 4 of your patches like that and just send them down. This guy's also mining from down here. And that's 8. That's half your dudes. So now you have half your dudes here and half your dudes there. Now one thing you got to be careful about is when you make gas over here, what you want to do is if you have exactly the same number of guys on one base as you do on the other base, and then you take 2 of them off to build gas, and then you take 4 more of them off to build gas, now this base has 6 less than that base, and that's ridiculous. So there's 2 options. You can either use the guys from your main to make gas at your natural so that it's your main that has fewer guys, or if you much better way that I would suggest is if you want to keep the same number of guys mining minerals in both places, what you do is you take the guys at your natural and you send 2 of them to make gas, and then you send 4 more of them to go mine at gas. So now you've just taken 6 guys off and put them onto gas. You come up here and grab 3, which is half of 6, and you move those guys down to your natural, and now they're balanced again. Simple, 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 simple. So keeping your bases balanced and the number of workers is really going to have a big impact on how much money you can get. Because once you're later on into the game, you'll see that what the heck? Go faster. Alright, I'll just fast forward. So right now you have 16 patches and 47 workers. So you don't have enough workers to fully saturate. And that means that with 47 workers, you should have 47 minus 6 minus 1. So is 40. So 20 times 40 is 8. Oh no, 40 times 40 is 16. You should have 1,600 minerals coming in, plus the mules. which is I think 100 each. So this should say 18, and it only says 15. So you're about 300 minerals short just because of the saturation problem. And it's kind of a big saturation problem. Like, if it's pretty obvious if you select the guys down here. This should be 16 at least, maybe 18, maybe 20, and it's only 10. So it's costing you 300 minerals every minute, not 300 minerals once, 300 minerals every minute for a long time. It's probably costing you, 800, 900, 1,000 minerals over the course of the game. This is, remember I said every fight that I've watched has an example of micro that's costing you more than it's gaining you. This is an example where both you and your opponent do that. So right now, you have your siege tanks in front and your marines behind them. The proper maneuver at this point is just to move your marines to right here, over here on the right side of your group. And what that'll do is the guys that are super close will just start to fight, and the guys that aren't super close will start to walk in this direction until they find an opening to fight, and they'll all form an arc along about this line and start shooting at the bad guy. So that's one click, and it's an A move. You almost always want to do an A move. You almost never want to do a move command in combat unless you really know that that's exactly the right thing to do. So your opponent is moving in. He's moving in. This is bad. So he just took a bunch of tank shots, but he could have killed this tank and maybe this tank before the next round of tank shots even happened if he had just not done that move command. So he's walking in with a little A move. This tank is shooting at this tank. It's going to fire one more shot and this tank is going to be dead, but instead he's going to move his stuff in. So he would have avoided 2 tank shots if he had just not done that. And now he's shooting over there, and it's just generally bad stuff. That's another thing. So that's what he did wrong, right? He did a move command just like you did before, and that totally cost him a whole bunch of damage. Whenever your guys are moving, they're not shooting. This is overthinking this fight, man. Don't move in. Just attack, move, or retreat. Obviously, the best move for him would have been to retreat because he's got all these tanks on the high ground. There's no need to be engaging you down here. Just let Tony siege up down there, and you siege up here and put another siege tank down there, and now Tony can't do anything, and Tony has to go home or just keep the contain or something. Then, look at this army. Your army is way bigger than his in this local engagement, and you're going to pick up a bunch of guys and put them in the medevac and fly away. Like, why did you do that? And these guys are all following the medevac while that guy shoots at them. And he even kills your siege tank. And these guys all go suicide up here. And this guy goes and suicides over here. I'm not saying your micro should be better. I'm saying you shouldn't micro. Because your macro has problems, and as long as your macro has problems, they far outweigh the the benefits you can get from micro. So, like, StarCraft is made up like 60 or 70% who got the most money and spent it well. And then after that, there's this big positioning consideration. And then after that, there's this big composition situation. And then after that, there's micro. So micro is like on the bottom of the list. You should never do micro unless you're really good at everything else, is my point. Like, it's a very small percentage of StarCraft that micro even contributes to. Like, remember in BlizzCon, maybe 3 BlizzCons ago, they interviewed Blizzard, and one of the questions was like, why is Stim so overpowered? And Blizzard said, well, we have a bunch of test scenarios, and we've looked at a bunch of games, and we've looked at a bunch of pro replays and normal player replays, and in general, Stim costs the attacker exactly as much as it costs the defender. In a lot of situations, it's not even worth using Stim. So Stim feels overpowered because of the speed that it gives to you, but the damage it does, 10% across your whole army, people overestimate how important it is, how powerful it is, and in general we feel like it's a balanced ability because it tends to hurt the attacker just as much as it hurts the defender. And I thought that was a really funny answer, because that's the same thing that's going on here with micro. Like, every time a guy who's in range to shoot his weapon is not shooting his weapon because you told him to do something else, that's costing you something. And even if it's also gaining you a benefit, you have to compare that benefit to the cost. You can't just compare it to nothing. So anyway, Yeah, every fight, Micro was bad. Micro was bad. And I'm not saying go on, like, if you want to improve your Micro, go on the unit tester and practice your Micro and get better at it. But I'm saying that for now, just don't do it, because that will be a huge improvement right there by itself. Like, we'll work on Micro after you've perfected your macro. For now, work on your macro, man, because you should talk to Tom if Tom watches this. Tom's macro is perfect. Tom's Micro isn't great, and Tom does fine, man. So yeah, it's part of, if you've seen the mineral drill, it's just generally me playing against silver, gold, and platinum level opponents without doing any Micro, just only using the minimap, a move across the minimap and never even look at the fights, kind of thing. And you can really beat people all the way up through Platinum League without doing any Micro ever. So at this point, you're so far ahead that there's no possible way your opponent can win the game, even though he's got 3 bases and he expanded quicker than you. He's even getting a 4th base quicker than you. Look at this. He's made no workers, and you've made a ton of workers, so you're way ahead. And do you know why you've made a ton of workers? From about the 10-minute mark on, even though you still missed several queue-ups of workers, you generally queued up to 3 workers at both command centers. And so you've seen in the first 11 minutes you only got 32 workers, which is terrible. But from here on, you're just going to decide, look, I'm going to make a lot of workers. And this is so beautiful, because from this moment on, you come from behind by 12 workers and actually go to be ahead of him significantly just by queuing up a crap ton of workers all the time. So you're going to queue up to 3, and then you're going to queue up to 3, and then you're going to queue up to 3. So again, idle command center while you fight, idle command center while you fight, idle command center while you fight. This is all of you're trying to be cute with drop Micro and stuff. But if your army is twice as big as his because you didn't do a drop and he did do a drop and his drop killed 1 tank, you're gonna win. Like, it's better to have a giant army than it is to Micro drops. So every time you're doing a drop, you're queuing up to 3 workers and queuing up to 3 workers. And I think this is because somebody once upon a time told you that, hey, when you're busy looking at your drop, you should queue up to 3 or 4 workers, because, you know, while you're doing Micro-intensive stuff, it's hard to remember to make workers all the time. And that's great advice, but it would be even better advice if somebody just said, hey, all the time, throughout the entire game, you should queue up to 3 workers at each command center. That's much better advice. So you pulled way ahead on workers just because you queued up a bunch of workers at your command centers, and that's great, and I want to see you do that every time on every line. And then you disconnect and lose the game because internet is awesome. So anyway, let's watch Nebbish versus Pickle Terran, because that's always fun. I'm not actually going to watch it. I'm just going to select both of their command centers. So these are 2 top 8 ranked Terran players, and their command centers, they're not idle very often. And they're both going to make their orbitals at exactly the same moment. And their command centers continue not to be idle very often, and continue not to be idle very... I haven't seen this game, I don't know what's going on, but I knew that I could load up any game, any TVT, and grab the command centers, and this is what we would see. Not idle very often. Not idle very often. Now, the more practice you get, the fewer workers you have to queue up in order to not miss workers. So you can see a lot of the time these guys are queuing up to 2 workers, or queuing up to 4 workers, and they're not massively over queuing. Actually, at a certain point, because Picklebeard is doing such an early attack, Nick is going to pull workers and attack with them and going to completely cut workers intentionally. And we're going to see both players during the fight, they're not going to really make workers because they're really concerned right now about their army size. But as soon as the fight is over and Picklebeard is even chasing Nick up to the high ground, more and more workers and more and more workers and more and more workers and more and more workers, and 3 workers at once and 1 worker at once and 2 workers at once and 2 workers at once. And even, yeah, so this didn't, so in your game, one of you guys had, what was it, like 27 workers, and the other one had 35 at 10 minutes. And I guess with this attack, when Nick's suiciding a bunch of workers, you have to count those 11 towards the count. So Nick had 40, 50, 49 workers at 10 minutes. That's a pretty big difference. Wait, no. 42 workers instead of 20, 30, 32. So 10 extra workers. Anyway. Workers. And this is, you can tell, this is what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to constantly keep workers producing while not getting too many extra workers. And you're doing what this guy is doing, which is accidentally cutting workers. Accidentally cutting workers. Right now he's accidentally cutting more workers. And he's doing it kind of on purpose because he's playing a contained game. He's got Nick on the ropes. Making 3 workers at a time is just going to eat into his marine count. There's no reason to do it. So he's even cutting workers at this point. He's got 59. He doesn't need any more to stay ahead of a guy who's stuck on one base. But in that early game, we've said 6 minutes, 24 workers. 6 minutes, they both have exactly 24 workers. This is like very consistent. You can load up any High Masters or Grandmaster game and just look at 6 minutes. They're going to have 24 workers, because if they didn't, that would be crazy. And at 8 minutes, they're going to have 30 or more workers. They have 31 and 34. And then from here on out, there's a battle, so it doesn't really keep up very consistently. Oh. So I see that you like the 2 racks. I believe I've shown in a video somewhere like the ideal 2 racks. I should probably just go look for it and email it to you instead of recording.